Welcome to our latest Hippocratic Adventures chat, where we talk about everything related to practicing medicine abroad. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to download your free ebook, which walks you through the 3 steps to starting your adventure. Head over to hippocraticadventures.com/subscribe to kickstart your adventure. I'm your host, Dr. Shwaniba Pat, and today I'm here with Dr. Kristine Goins. Dr. Kristine Goins is a board-certified integrative adult and pediatric psychiatrist, physician coach, and digital nomad. Having served in several healthcare settings and various leadership positions within academic centers, Dr. Goins has witnessed firsthand the impact that burnout, stress, work-life imbalance can have on physician lives. Motivated by a desire to make a difference, Dr. Goins founded NomadMD, where she empowers doctors to break the chains of traditional medicine, to embrace time freedom, and work from anywhere in the world. So before we get started, smash that subscribe button, sit back, and enjoy. Dr. Kristine Goins, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. So tell me your story. You have spent the last 2.5 years abroad, and you have lived in, I think it's Brazil, Georgia, Argentina, and you're zooming in from Peru right now. So take us back a little bit. Tell us where the story started, and what it was that made you want to have an experience abroad.
Yeah, my journey into medicine started really young. I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was 8 years old. But along that path, I also began to develop other passions. And one of them was this desire for travel, which started when I was a teenager. I never had really the opportunity to travel. We didn't have the resources to travel, but I did have a library card. And so I would read, and that was the way that I kind of developed my passion for living all around the world, is through reading books by a particular author, Eric Jerome. He really inspired me. His characters were Black, professional men and women who were just polyglots and globetrotters. And I was like, oh my God, this could really be my life. And I never knew how I would quite blend that with the fact that I was going to be a doctor, but I was like, we'll figure that out later. And then throughout the medical journey, I always tried to find ways to like pull it in. I really wanted to study abroad during college, and with pre-med, it was a strain, and it came down to this moment where I had to choose between, I was a Spanish minor, going away to Spain for a semester, or starting medical school early because I got into a joint program where I was starting my senior year in college. And I chose medicine. It was like the first time that I was like, wow, is there some type of sacrifice that now has to happen for the other passions in my life for medicine? And so in many ways that continued through that journey. You always think like the next thing is going to be different, maybe residency, maybe fellowship. And there were different opportunities for travel within that, but it was never quite what I dreamed of. And I noticed for me, when I became an attending, especially, I had taken this like 10-day trip to Thailand, and I sat on the beach, Kata Beach, and I was writing in my journal, and I said, this is actually my life. Like I could feel it physically. I could feel that I was living in the life that I was supposed to have. And my life back in DC was like, that was like my vacation. Like that was like for 2 weeks a year or something, something like that. That wasn't the normal life I was supposed to be living. And so on my 17-hour flight back, I was just like fervently writing strategy, a plan. What was I going to do? So I wrote up this like 5-year plan. And in the midst of all of that, there was the experience that many physicians have been having in terms of burnout. I had experienced that several times in
Mhm.
medical school. I had experienced that in residency as well, and fellowship as well. Not the whole time, but definitely in seasons. And I thought initially when I became an attending, again, like, okay, well, that's over. This is going to be different. And it wasn't. And I had to do a lot of deep work to figure out what needed to change. Um, and it really took more than just thinking about it. It really took having like a constellation of nudges,
Mm.
verse, I would say. First, it was a lot of physical ailments, chest pains in the middle of the day, having like spasms all over like every organ system began to be impacted by me not leaning into the life that I really wanted to have. It became physical, and then it became also deeply emotional. It left burnout, it was going into
Mhm.
depression. And so even then, I was still holding on because of this fear of change. And I think so many of us experience that on different levels, but what is it going to be like? Or what are other people going to say? Or what if everything goes to crap after I make this decision? or and during COVID, during that season, both of my grandmothers died. And that really jolted me back into, a present moment awareness of the the precious commodity of time, and that it isn't guaranteed that I will have 5 years to figure it out and go on my voyage. And so I said, no, we have to do this now. This is important to us now. Everything is showing, our body is showing that this is important to us now. And so I took my 5-year plan, I turned it into a 5-month plan, and I booked a one-way ticket to Cartagena, Colombia. And that's where I started.
Oh, so you actually started in Colombia then. Wow.
Yeah.
So how many, when you were on that vacation to Thailand, how many years out of residency, or I guess fellowship, how many years out of fellowship were you at that point?
One.
1 year.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. So you actually had this realization pretty early on. You had had experiences in med school and residency and fellowship where you were like, is this it? Is this really it? And then it was that trip to Thailand where you were like, no, this is it. This is
Yeah.
kind of the experience that I want. And then how long did it take you from that experience in Thailand where then you were journaling a lot to actually ending up in Colombia?
2 years.
2 years. And so it took you some time. And those 2 years, you had a feeling, you had a sense like, okay, I want to experience something abroad. But what was holding you back from pulling that plug kind of immediately? Or what did you have to get in place for you to actually take that next step?
Yeah. So it really was a lot of introspective work.
Mm.
Um, I would say, I think if you would have asked me then, I would have said, oh, I just don't have a plan.
Yeah.
I would say, well, what am I going to do with my student loans? But what am I going to do about healthcare? I just had all these fears, even around, the financial piece of it, even though I was very financially secure because I had been working on my financial literacy and doing work in that area for years already. So it was more about self-limiting thoughts that were
Mm.
coming up for me, and those were just kind of like the excuses that I kind of use with myself, and they sound pretty good on the outside, I feel like. But the truth, if looking from this vantage point, the truth was I was scared. I was
Mm.
scared. I didn't know what that life would actually look like. I could feel it on Kata Beach, right? I could feel that it felt like freedom.
Mm,
But freedom can be really scary too. There can be a dizziness in having like the choice of being anywhere in the world that you want to be at any given time and having no financial limitation. Like there can be some dizziness in that for people too. And so if I look back, I would say it was just a lot of self-limiting thoughts. And so what I needed to go through was learning to trust myself,
mm,
learning to have confidence in the desires that are placed in my heart, that they're not placed there for no reason at all, but they're a nudge to move
mm.
forward in a certain direction, not only for my benefit and my joy and my peace and my happiness, but also for the work that I could also do for others and the value
Mm.
I can bring to them. So
And so what was it that took you then from that place of fear where you were like, what if this goes awry? What about my finances? Um, what got you from that place of fear over to then booking that flight to Colombia? Because I think that a lot of people that are listening to this, they are in that place of fear. They feel similarly. I mean, I felt similarly. This totally resonates with me because there were so many moments where I was like, no, this can't be it because it doesn't feel like very fulfilling right now. But I also didn't know how. I had this dream similar to you, but I didn't know how to take that next step. I had so many fears, like, what if my career goes poof? Yeah, what about the finances? What if it doesn't work out? What if I don't like it? So what helped you get through those fears? Because I think a lot of people are in that place where they feel stuck. They have some inclination that there is more for them, that this experience abroad could be a great stepping stone for them. They just don't know how to kind of get there. If you're loving this conversation and you want to start your own adventure, head over to hippocraticadventures.com/subscribe and download your own free ebook that walks you through 3 steps to kickstart your adventure.
for me, it was taking the time, the space, the silence to get clarity on what I really wanted,
Mm.
because that really helps you to move in a certain direction. But to move in that direction, you really have to be clear on what your intention is. And so I started with coaching. You know, that's the first thing that helped me. People always ask me about like my first coaching experience. And actually, it was this coach that I hired that told me that my dream wasn't possible. I
Oh.
had actually told them, like, what I really want to do is I want to travel the world as a physician. I don't want to work, I want to work less than 20 hours a week. I really want
Mhm.
to have time freedom. I'm not trying to be on the beach with my computer working, 10 hours a day. And so what they said to me was, that's really beautiful. That's not something that you'll be able to do, right away. Maybe it'll be 3, 4 years down the line, and maybe that could be something that's possible for you. And so I say that to say that like I you want to have the right coach, but also you want to have someone in your corner who has been through the experience, who understands. And I really do feel that even that coach, what kind of allowed me to gain a lot from that experience was, in all the overworking that I was doing, I had an hour a week where I had to dedicate focus to my own life, to myself, to what my intentions were, to what I wanted. I hadn't really taken that time in a long time, since therapy. It was basically like another version of that. And so it really helped me to do that. And then when this person told me that I couldn't do something, I was like, what? Okay, well, now I have to show up and show out and and do the things. So, I think that there's a lot to gain from every kind of experience, But I think that was something that really kind of propelled me in that direction. And in addition to, at the time, I didn't see any physicians doing what I'm trying to do, who are living all over the world and moving to different countries, and so I look to other people who are travelers, who have been traveling for decades, in that manner. And, what happened to them if they got lonely, or what happened to them if they got lost in a place where they didn't know the language, or, just hearing all of these like really inspirational stories of other humans who had similar passions and desires. And I'm like, I can do that. I can figure it out. It won't be exactly like my journey because I'm different and I'm doing something different, but there is something to glean, there's something to learn from every person's experience that I think can enhance your own.
Absolutely. And I just think that I think that also goes back to the fact that most people that I've talked to, when they thought about moving abroad, there was no one around them doing that or had done that. And so they too kind of felt like, is this like this weird dream that I have? So I think I'm just so glad that you're sharing your story as well. So when you landed in Colombia, so that was your first experience living abroad. What was that like? And then how did you end up? Did you practice psychiatry? How did that work? And then how did you then branch out into all the other countries that you've now been to?
Well, one of the things that I did when I left training was I went into academia, but I simultaneously started my own LLC. So I was always doing, contract work, consultative work for myself on the side. And that was because I've always believed in multiple income streams and just the ability and the flexibility of owning your own work in some type of way. And so when I left, when I booked my one-way flight and I was leaving academia, I still had something else that I was doing a couple days a week. When I always say about this, like I always thought working 5 days a week, or really as a doctor, I was working a lot more than 5 days a week, to be honest. But I always thought that was very backwards. So one of my goals was to work 2 days a week and to be off 5 days a week. That seems like much more balanced to me. And so that has been that has been my work schedule since I left the US. And that's the type of work that I do on that 2 days. If I'm not coaching physicians or I'm moving abroad and creating their own ideal lifestyle, then I am, doing that consultative work in integrative psychiatry. And so I do all of that work, in the US. That's my US based work. But my other 5 days, I'm just exploring. So it started in Colombia. And then from there, I moved to Ecuador. I moved to Panama. I also lived in Guatemala, Mexico, Canada, and then that's when I moved to Argentina, Brazil. I lived in Georgia, the country, and now
Like the country.
the country. You always have to say the country because we realize
So I want to actually go back to this. So originally you had a job in academic medicine and you were doing that, but on the side, on your own time, you built up your own, was it a private practice or was it, it sounded like part of it was coaching. Was the other part then private practice like psychiatry or, tell me more about that because that's something that you took with you when you moved abroad.
Yeah.
You
So
left academia, but you took that with you.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was always doing like contract work. So consultation work with medical practices and organizations. I was always doing that work on the side. It's similar to the same work that I was doing in academia, but I just got paid a lot more to do it, not in academia. So it was still the work that I was passionate about. And so that's the work that I was still doing when I left. But instead of doing it just 1 day a week, because I didn't really have time to do it more than that when I was in academia, now I could do it a couple days a week. by choice, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing. Coaching really only became something that I thought about 2 years into my travel, because um, I started to think about my life and what I was learning. I was gaining all of this clarity. I was gaining cognitive flexibility, making all of these meaningful connections with people all over the world. I was experiencing more time freedom than I ever had in my life. And recognizing that with that space came this ability to really tap into my creativity and my imagination. I'm like, what do I want to create in the world? What would be really meaningful? What would be great? What would be of value? And I started to think about where I was in that place of burnout and depression, and seeing a lot of my colleagues still in some of those spaces. And I said, what if they knew that this was possible, this other, life, which still involves, having, an intimate connection with the work that they're so passionate about. And that's where NomadMD and the coaching experience kind of came from. So that was later on.
Okay. And so initially, what you took with you when you left the US was the consult work you had already been doing. You kind of ramped it up. And then you spent actually the rest of the time kind of exploring.
Yeah.
And then it was during this process of actually living abroad where the idea for coaching and NomadMD came into play.
Yeah.
So tell us about NomadMD. What is it? What is it about? And how do you help people? And who do you serve? Yeah.
Yeah. So NomadMD, I help doctors work less from anywhere. It's really about embracing a life of freedom. It's about being able to digitize your expertise so that you can work from anywhere. And I think as physicians, we don't always recognize that we have all of these transferable, attributes and talent, skills, traits, leadership, our communication skills, our ability to think outside the box. There's all of these qualities that we have that we utilize every single day in the work that we do. Many of us for others, particularly when we're employed, that can work, that can help us to excel in so many different industries, but also in medicine, in our own expertise, in our own fields. And so it's really in helping physicians to better understand how they can utilize their own special sauce to create what they want in the world, and to be able to navigate expanding that into a life that they truly want, not only in medicine, but the life that they want outside of medicine. So, how much time do they want to be able to spend with their family and their friends? Do they want to spend, 6 months or even more outside of the country, and allowing their, children or their family to experience other languages and to learn, about other histories? I think that just having that flexibility is something that every physician should know is possible and have the opportunity to create for themselves. So it's really having the strategic guidance and accountability, and being able to work on the implementation of those things that need to be in place in order to create that life and make that happen for them.
I think that's wonderful. And I think you're right. I think helping physicians recognize that they have skills that are transferable outside of clinic, outside of hospitals, that they actually have a lot to offer. I think that's actually really, really important. And I don't think that's something that's emphasized during training, right? During medical school or training or fellowship. And so when you work with physicians through NomadMD, what are kind of like the most common roadblocks that they experience that prevents them from, let's say, spending the amount of time they want with their kids or with their families, or the amount of vacation time that they want, or yeah. So what have you found kind of in your experience?
I think it's quite similar to the
Mhm.
experience that I had. I think we're all having a very similar experience where there are things that we come up with, finances becomes one of the major ones that people talk about and people think about. Student loans comes up as part of finances typically. Um, it's this dedication also to a cause, feeling that we cannot serve the communities or in the spaces that we want to outside of certain
Mhm.
systems. So we have to do it this way. There's no other way that I could really help other than
Mhm.
doing it this way. Um, I think that there's a lot of, within training, there's a lot that has been um, taught to us about doing things a certain way. And if we leave the algorithm, then we feel very lost. And so it's, what are my colleagues going to think? What is my family going to say? I said I was going to be a doctor. Now I'm saying I'm going to leave the country. So all of these different types of conversations come up. Um, I would say those are probably some of the most critical, but I again bring it back to the self-limiting thoughts because I think they're really all just thoughts. And that for most people, if you drill it all the way down, they could come up with a pretty good financial plan. They could come up with a strategy for what they will tell their employer, or how they could begin to experience or think about their expertise in a digital way. I've not met too many physicians who there's not some aspect of their work that they're able to do online that could allow for more flexibility in their work and their lifestyle. But I think the main part of it is thinking outside the box. It's like
Mhm.
doing it a different way than they've been taught. And it's scary. It's scary because, like you mentioned, throughout training, we're not taught about how we could use our skills in different ways. We're basically told that either you can be an academic or you could probably maybe start a private practice, but that's pretty much all you can do. So,
You are preaching to the choir here, because 100% agree with that. I feel like throughout training, there are literally two options. One is academia, the other is community, and you pick, but it's one of those lanes. And um, when you grow up in those academic training centers, you only see the people that chose to stay there, right? You don't see the people that went off and did something different, because they're not in that environment anymore. And so I do think, I even think about myself, like when we thought about moving abroad, I did get stuck about how I can work in an environment where I wouldn't be able to work in a hospital immediately, because of the language barrier. And um, it's interesting because in this process of moving abroad, I've actually felt like I have reinvented myself in some ways. Um, in the sense of there are different strengths that have come out, which never would have. I'm doing things now that I never would have done. I would have never been doing an interview like this, or a chat like this. Just wasn't something I ever had the opportunity to do. And I think the way that we're trained, we're literally shown role models that do it one particular way. And then when you look at all your friends, they're also doing it that one particular way. So it is hard to kind of step out of that mold and start looking for other role models, even within your profession, right?
Absolutely. And, One thing that I just did a month in the US, and it was my first time being back in a year.
Mm,
And I was there for 3 different medical conferences. And one of the things that I learned through that experience, which I hadn't known, was that there were these doctors doing entrepreneurial things,
mm.
but in silence and
Inside.
undercover. And I was so confused by that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, this has been here all the time, but because it is not what is, center line, because it is not, research publications, and, it is just behind closed doors. And I wondered about how powerful physicians could become within healthcare if we actually publicize and let other physicians, especially those in training and those coming up, know, like, hey, we have this other side of us where we're able to do so many other things that can really transform healthcare and really change the shape of what so many physicians are experiencing within healthcare.
I think that's actually so insightful that they were doing that, but they were doing that in silence. I think that's very, very true. So what have been some of the challenges, I guess, in having spent the last 2.5 years abroad? Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to sound kind of trite, but there's not been any challenges compared to the challenges that I was facing. I was talking to my best friend the other day because she's here in Peru, and we're just talking about being doctors in medicine, and I was saying, my worst day abroad has been better than one of my best days when I was in the state that I was in, as an employee physician. So it's really been a completely different kind of experience. I would say that the biggest challenge, if I had to pick one, would be that when you're traveling all over the world and family or close friend decides, like, oh, we're going to do an impromptu meeting, we're going to have a party on Friday night. And you're like, I'm in like Ecuador. Like, I'm not coming there for this party tomorrow night. So there's these certain moments that you could miss out on because you just can't, you can be anywhere, but it's like not realistic for you to travel like 24 hours to like be somewhere at a certain time. So those are the things that I probably miss the most. That to me is probably one of my biggest challenges. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, I have all these experiences with my family and friends in, places all over the world that we never would have had if I didn't leave, the US. And so I would say that's the other side of it. But it is different to know that, you might miss some things, and that's okay. You're having a different experience. That's my biggest challenge.
And okay, so now we're going to switch to kind of the rapid fire section.
Okay.
And this is just meant to be like off the top responses.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions that I'm going to ask you, actually, the next question was asked by the physician I talked to previously prior to chatting with you. This was the question she wanted me to ask the next person I talked to.
Oh.
So, just off the top of your head, quick response. One thing you miss about the US?
Having certain hair products
Okay.
that you will not find anywhere else.
What is the coolest place you've visited so far?
My favorite place I've ever lived so far is Bocas del Toro, Panama. Um, just being able to wake up, ride my bike along the coast, yoga in the jungle, take the taxi boat to another island, watch dolphins. That's just a normal Tuesday in
That's
Bocas.
just a
So
normal. I love that. What is one thing you've learned about yourself?
I can trust my inner knowing. I know the answer.
That's good. And any advice you have for a fellow physician, a psychiatrist, just any physician who's thinking about moving abroad, who has a similar dream, but is kind of feeling stuck? They just feel paralyzed.
Yeah, I would say that if you have this deep longing for travel, don't ignore it. Move into it, lean into it. It is this external journey, for an internal purpose. So move into that. If you need resources, if you need support, seek it. There's so many of us who have made the journey, and you can do it. You were made for this, and you deserve the life that you truly want to live.
That's wonderful. Well, Dr. Kristine Goins, thank you so much for joining us. She is a psychiatrist, an integrative psychiatrist, a physician coach, and founder of NomadMD. You can find her at her website, thenomadmd.com. She's on Instagram, Facebook. I'll include the links below. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story and for really sharing with others, what is possible, and to not keep yourself in a box.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's your biggest insight or aha from this conversation? What resonated with you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're looking to start your own adventure, then you're going to love our free ebook, How to Start Your Adventure. You can head over to hippocraticadventures.com/subscribe right now, where you'll learn the 3 steps to get going. And with that, we wrap up another episode of Discovering Where Your White Coat Can Take You. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with a friend or a colleague, because this really helps us reach more physicians who want to move abroad and just don't know how.